The last thing Amelia expected to inherit was another disappointment. After months of losing everything that had once made life feel secure, she stepped into the quiet lawyer's office, carrying nothing but a worn handbag and fading hope. The room smelled of old paper and polished wood, its silence broken only by the ticking of an antique clock. She had already convinced herself the meeting was a formality. Whatever remained of her late grandfather's estate had surely been claimed by relatives long before she arrived. The attorney adjusted his glasses, unfolded a yellow document, and calmly announced that the farmhouse on Black Ridge Road, together with the surrounding acreage, now belonged solely to Amelia. A heavy silence settled across the room before laughter shattered it. Her relatives exchanged amused glances. One cousin leaned back in his chair, shaking his head with a grin. "Congratulations," he sneered. "You inherited the only property in the county that's worth less standing than demolished." Another relative chuckled, calling it one final joke from a stubborn old man who had always favored impossible causes over practical decisions. Someone muttered that even the land had stopped producing crops decades ago. To them, the farmhouse was nothing more than rotting timber surrounded by dying fields. Amelia said nothing. She simply accepted the deed with trembling hands. It wasn't excitement she felt. It was survival. With nowhere else to sleep and no one left willing to help, even a collapsing farmhouse sounded better than another lonely night, wondering what tomorrow might bring. Hours later, she followed the narrow country road toward her unexpected inheritance. Endless neglected fields stretched beneath a gray sky while the weathered farmhouse slowly emerged on the horizon like a forgotten memory. Then something caught her attention. Parked separately along nearby roads were several gleaming black SUVs, their engines idling quietly. Their tinted windows concealed the people inside, yet Amelia couldn't shake the unmistakable feeling that every pair of hidden eyes was watching her arrive. Morning light revealed the farmhouse without mercy. The roof sagged beneath decades of storms, loose boards groaned whenever the wind pushed against them, and shattered windows reflected a life long abandoned. Rusted farming equipment disappeared beneath waist-high weeds, while broken fences stretched across the fields like forgotten scars. Everything Amelia had been told was true. The place looked beyond saving. She unlocked the swollen front door and stepped inside. Dust floated through narrow beams of sunlight, carrying the scent of damp wood and age. Every room echoed with silence. Yet something about the house felt strangely alive, as though it had been patiently waiting for someone to return. She had barely set her single suitcase on the worn wooden floor when the sound of expensive engines interrupted the stillness. 3 luxury vehicles rolled into the driveway. Well-dressed men climbed out, introducing themselves as developers, investors, and land acquisition specialists. Their smiles were polished, but their eyes never wandered toward the farmhouse. Instead, they studied the surrounding land with unsettling focus. One man politely offered to buy the property immediately. Before Amelia could answer, another doubled the amount. When she hesitated again, a third businessman offered even more, promising cash before sunset and insisting she would never receive a better opportunity. Amelia asked the simplest question she could think of. "Why does everyone want this place?" The smiles remained, but no one answered. Instead, they exchanged brief glances, repeated that the farmhouse was a burden, and encouraged her not to waste another day living there. Their rehearsed confidence felt less like kindness and more like desperation. After they finally drove away, an uneasy feeling settled over the empty fields. Long after darkness covered the countryside, Amelia stood beside an upstairs window, unable to sleep. Far beyond the broken fence, bright headlights slowly circled the property. They passed once, then again, and again. The vehicles never stopped or approached the house. They simply continued their silent patrol until nearly dawn. Watching them disappear into the darkness, Amelia realized one unsettling truth. No one chased something worthless with that much determination. The sleepless night left Amelia with more questions than answers. If everyone believed the farmhouse was worthless, why had strangers been willing to pay a fortune for it without even stepping inside? Instead of dwelling on the mystery, she decided to begin cleaning. It was the only way to make the crumbling house livable, and perhaps the only way to uncover whatever everyone else seemed determined to keep hidden. She opened every window she could force loose, letting fresh country air chase away decades of stale dust. Cobwebs clung to the ceilings, and every sweep of her broom uncovered another forgotten layer of the past. The house creaked with every movement, as though it were slowly waking from a long sleep. While dragging a broken cabinet across the sitting room, Amelia heard an unusual hollow sound beneath the floor. Curious, she knelt and carefully pried up one of the loose wooden boards. Hidden inside a narrow compartment rested a small iron box wrapped in faded cloth. Her pulse quickened. Inside were weathered journals, hand-drawn maps, brittle survey records, and bundles of handwritten notes stained by age. The handwriting belonged to her late grandfather. As she turned each fragile page, one sentence appeared again and again. "Protect what sleeps below." The words were underlined every time. She searched the room more carefully and noticed strange symbols carved into the old support beams. They matched markings sketched throughout the journals, yet their meaning remained impossible to understand. Another passage caught her attention. It spoke of greed destroying families, of trust buried deeper than treasure, and of a promise that only someone who valued the land above wealth deserved to inherit its secret. A chill traveled through Amelia despite the warm afternoon sunlight. She looked through the dusty window toward the endless neglected fields stretching beyond the farmhouse. For the first time, she stopped seeing abandoned farmland. Instead, she saw a carefully guarded secret waiting beneath the soil. And somewhere beyond those silent fields, someone else was almost certainly searching for it too. The farmhouse no longer felt abandoned. Ever since Amelia discovered the hidden journals beneath the floorboards, an invisible pressure seemed to settle over the property. Every creak of the old house sounded like a warning. Every passing vehicle made her glance toward the windows. Someone knew she hadn't left, and they were becoming increasingly determined to change that. The first sign appeared at sunrise. The fence she had spent an entire afternoon repairing had been destroyed overnight. Fresh tire tracks cut across the muddy field, leading nowhere before disappearing into the distance. There was no note, no explanation, only a silent message that someone could enter her land whenever they wished. The following morning brought another surprise. The small tractor she depended on to clear the overgrown fields refused to start. A local mechanic inspected it and frowned. Several fuel lines had been sliced clean through with a sharp blade. "Machines don't do this by themselves," he said quietly. Before Amelia could process what was happening, a certified legal notice arrived in her mailbox. A powerful development company suddenly claimed the farmhouse sat on disputed property and demanded she halt all work immediately. The timing was impossible to ignore. They hadn't questioned the land for decades. Why now? As the days passed, strangers appeared almost daily. Men wearing reflective safety vests walked across the fields, carrying maps and measuring equipment. They introduced themselves as survey inspectors, yet every question Amelia asked was answered with vague smiles. Before leaving, each one offered the same advice. You should sell before this becomes complicated. Instead, Amelia kept digging, cleaning, and searching. Then everything nearly ended. While gathering fallen branches beside an abandoned equipment shed, an old excavator roared to life without warning. It rolled downhill, smashing through a wooden fence and crashing into the exact spot where she had been standing only seconds earlier. The operator blamed failing brakes. Amelia didn't believe him. That evening, another buyer arrived with an offer nearly 3 times higher than the first. She refused again. As his luxury SUV disappeared beyond the hills, Amelia stood alone beneath the darkening sky with one undeniable realization. No one wages a campaign of fear over land that holds no value. Someone wasn't trying to buy the farmhouse anymore. They were trying to stop her from discovering what lay beneath it. The next morning, Amelia refused to let fear dictate her future. Whoever had been trying to intimidate her wanted the farmhouse abandoned, and that alone convinced her she was moving in the right direction. She slipped the journals into her backpack, picked up a shovel, and walked into the neglected fields, determined to follow every clue her grandfather had left behind. Hours passed beneath the warm afternoon sun as she cleared tangled weeds and repaired sections of the broken irrigation system. The earth was dry and stubborn, untouched for years, yet every page of the journal insisted the answers were hidden beneath the land itself. Then her shovel struck stone. It wasn't an ordinary rock. Brushing away layers of packed soil, Amelia uncovered a carefully carved marker. Its surface bore the exact same symbol she had seen etched into the farmhouse beams and drawn repeatedly throughout her grandfather's journal. Her heartbeat quickened. She searched the surrounding field and found another marker. Then another. Each stood the same distance apart, forming a deliberate path across the farmland. With the weathered map spread across her knees, Amelia connected the symbols one by one until the final line ended beside a towering oak tree overlooking the farmhouse. Unlike every other tree on the property, it appeared impossibly old, its enormous branches stretching across the sky like silent guardians. Kneeling beneath its twisted roots, Amelia dug carefully through the loose earth. Her fingers suddenly brushed cold metal. She uncovered a rusted iron ring firmly attached to a thick circular plate hidden beneath decades of soil. With every ounce of strength she pulled. The heavy cover shifted just enough to reveal a narrow stone shaft descending into complete darkness. A cool breath of ancient air escaped from below, carrying the scent of damp earth untouched for generations. Before Amelia could shine her flashlight inside, the distant growl of engines echoed across the fields. Several unfamiliar vehicles were approaching the farmhouse. Thinking quickly, she lowered the cover, scattered dirt over the hidden entrance, and gathered her tools as if nothing had happened. Whoever was coming could never know she had just found the first doorway to the secret buried beneath the land. By the end of the week, Amelia's refusal to sell had become the talk of the entire county. People who had ignored the farmhouse for decades suddenly treated it as the most valuable piece of land in the region. Wealthy investors called daily with even larger offers. Lawyers mailed complicated legal documents questioning her ownership. Distant relatives who had never bothered to visit before appeared at her doorstep pretending to care about her well-being while subtly encouraging her to walk away. It was no longer about buying a farmhouse. It was about getting Amelia off the land. She smiled politely, declined every offer, and revealed nothing about the hidden entrance beneath the old oak tree. When darkness covered the fields each night, she returned alone with a flashlight, a rope, and her grandfather's journal tucked safely inside her backpack. Lowering herself through the narrow stone shaft, she entered a forgotten underground passage where the air was cold, damp, and heavy with the scent of ancient earth. Every careful step echoed through the tunnel as though no human voice had disturbed its silence for generations. The rough stone walls were marked with familiar symbols, identical to those carved into the farmhouse beams. Rusted lantern hooks lined the corridor, while faded wooden supports hinted that someone had once maintained the passage with great care. Hidden inside a small alcove, Amelia discovered another journal wrapped in oilcloth. Its pages revealed that her ancestors had sworn an oath to protect something beneath the farm until the rightful heir proved worthy of its trust. Above ground, the pressure intensified. Large excavation machines suddenly appeared on neighboring properties. Their operators claimed to be preparing new construction sites, yet every machine seemed positioned closer to Amelia's land than the last. The constant rumble of heavy equipment carried across the fields from sunrise until dusk. Standing beside the old oak one evening, Amelia watched the machines moving closer and felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Her enemies no longer searched blindly. They believed the secret was somewhere beneath the land, and they were running out of patience. Sleep became a distant memory. Every spare hour Amelia spent inside the farmhouse was devoted to the journals spread across the old dining table. Their faded pages, once confusing fragments of family history, slowly began fitting together like pieces of an elaborate puzzle. Maps overlapped perfectly when placed in a certain order. Symbols carved into the farmhouse beams matched markings hidden in the margins of the journals. Even the stone markers beneath the fields formed a pattern that pointed toward something far greater than a forgotten tunnel. One sentence finally unlocked everything. The land is the key, the air is the lock. Amelia read the line again and again until its meaning became unmistakably clear. The farmhouse had never been the true inheritance. It had always been a test. As she continued studying the records, a hidden chapter folded inside the oldest journal revealed the truth her family had protected for generations. During a violent era of corruption, powerful criminals and dishonest officials had seized wealth from innocent miners, merchants, and landowners. Fearing the diamonds would fall into greedy hands, a small group of trusted caretakers secretly transported thousands of uncut stones beneath the farmhouse. Amelia's ancestors accepted the responsibility of guarding the hidden vault, swearing that no amount of money or pressure would ever tempt them to reveal its location. The final pages contained one extraordinary warning. The chamber could never be opened by someone driven by greed. Only the rightful heir who chose the land over fortune, who refused wealth when it was offered, and who protected the family's legacy instead of selling it, would discover the final entrance. Amelia lowered the journal, her hands trembling. Every painful decision she had made suddenly carried new meaning. Losing her home, rejecting every offer, enduring threats and intimidation. None of it had been meaningless. Without realizing it, she had passed every test her ancestors had prepared decades before she was born. Outside, thunder rolled across the darkening fields as a cold wind swept through the open windows. Somewhere beneath the farmhouse rested a fortune beyond imagination, and for the first time in generations, the secret had finally chosen its rightful guardian. The storm passed before dawn, leaving the countryside wrapped in an eerie silence. Amelia returned to the underground passage carrying the oldest journal, its final page folded open beside the weathered map. Every clue she had followed led to this moment. Every sacrifice, every threat, every sleepless night had brought her one step closer to the truth hidden beneath the farmhouse. Deep inside the tunnel, she reached a circular stone chamber unlike any she had seen before. Ancient symbols covered the walls, surrounding a heavy iron pedestal in the center. The final page instructed her to align 3 carved markers exactly as they appeared on the map. With trembling hands, Amelia rotated each weathered stone until the last symbol clicked into place. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the ground began to tremble. A deep rumble echoed through the chamber as unseen gears awakened after decades of silence. Dust drifted from the ceiling while 2 enormous stone doors slowly separated, revealing a hidden room untouched by time. Amelia stepped forward in disbelief. The chamber stretched far beyond the reach of her flashlight, its walls lined with shelves of sealed wooden chests and reinforced iron containers. She carefully lifted the lid from the nearest chest and froze. Hundreds of rough diamonds shimmered beneath the beam of her light, their uncut surfaces sparkling like frozen stars. Nearby rested velvet cases filled with rare emeralds, sapphires, and rubies, each preserved exactly as they had been hidden generations earlier. Yet, the greatest discovery wasn't the treasure. Stacked inside fireproof cabinets were leather-bound ledgers, original land deeds, handwritten testimonies, shipping records, and official documents bearing government seals. Together, they told the story of a vast criminal conspiracy that had stolen fortunes from innocent families before Amelia's ancestors secretly safeguarded both the evidence and the diamonds. Tears filled her eyes as she realized the truth. Her grandfather had never protected wealth for himself. He had protected justice. Standing alone inside the magnificent vault, surrounded by unimaginable riches and the proof that could rewrite history, Amelia understood that her family had never been poor. They had been guardians, and the greatest inheritance they passed down was never measured by the diamonds beneath the farm, but by the courage required to protect them until the right person finally arrived. For several minutes, Amelia barely noticed the diamonds surrounding her. Their brilliance faded against the weight of the documents stacked inside the fireproof cabinets. She carefully carried a bundle of leather-bound ledgers to an old wooden table and began turning the fragile pages one by one. With every signature, every faded map, and every official seal, the story buried beneath the farmhouse became darker than she had ever imagined. The records revealed names she recognized immediately: influential businessmen, respected public officials, wealthy land developers. Even distant members of her own family appeared throughout the files, connected by decades of secret agreements designed to erase the truth. Together, they had quietly manipulated property records, forged ownership deeds, bribed officials, and forced struggling families from land that legally belonged to them. The farmhouse had never been forgotten. It had been watched. Every failed purchase, every threatening letter, every suspicious visitor suddenly made perfect sense. They weren't searching for an abandoned building. They were hunting the evidence that could destroy everything they had built. One document stopped Amelia cold. It contained her grandfather's handwritten testimony explaining that he had refused millions of dollars to reveal the vault's location. Instead, he spent his entire life protecting both the diamonds and the proof of the conspiracy, knowing the wrong hands would erase history forever. Tears welled in Amelia's eyes as she carefully folded the pages closed. She finally understood why her grandfather had trusted only one heir. The diamonds could make someone unimaginably wealthy. The documents could return stolen land, restore broken families, and send powerful criminals to prison. That was the true inheritance. As Amelia placed the evidence back into its protective case, a distant metallic echo drifted through the underground tunnel. Someone was inside the passage, and judging by the growing footsteps, they weren't there to admire history. They had come to claim it before the truth reached the surface. The moment Amelia emerged from the underground vault, she made the decision her grandfather had hoped someone would one day have the courage to make. Instead of hiding the truth, she handed every journal, ledger, deed, and testimony to federal investigators. Within days, the evidence triggered one of the largest corruption investigations the region had ever witnessed. Search warrants were executed before sunrise. Luxury offices were raided. Private estates were searched. Boxes of hidden records, encrypted computers, and secret financial accounts were seized. The powerful men who had spent decades believing they were untouchable suddenly found themselves standing before cameras in handcuffs, their carefully crafted reputations collapsing overnight. The forged deeds hidden inside the vault proved impossible to deny. Court after court ruled that countless land transfers had been fraudulent from the very beginning. Families who had spent generations believing they had lost everything finally received official documents restoring farms, homes, and property that had been stolen through deception. Tears of grief were replaced with tears of relief as history was corrected at last. Amelia's own relatives watched the investigation unfold in stunned silence. The same people who had laughed when she inherited the crumbling farmhouse now avoided reporters and refused to answer difficult questions. Their greed had blinded them to the greatest inheritance their family had ever possessed. Weeks later, several of them gathered nervously outside the restored farmhouse, hoping Amelia might forgive their cruelty and welcome them back into her life. She opened the front door, listened quietly to their apologies, then gently closed it once they had finished. Some betrayals deserved understanding, others deserved distance. As the last vehicle disappeared down the long country road, Amelia looked across the peaceful fields with quiet satisfaction. The farmhouse everyone once called worthless had accomplished something no fortune alone ever could. It had returned justice to the people who had been waiting for it across generations. Months passed, and the farmhouse no longer resembled the forgotten place Amelia had first inherited. The broken roof had been replaced with handcrafted timber, the weathered walls stood strong once again, and fresh white paint reflected the morning sunlight across fields that had slowly come back to life. Crops swayed in the breeze where weeds had once ruled, while restored fences stretched proudly toward the horizon. Despite possessing a fortune beyond imagination, Amelia refused to disappear behind the gates of a luxurious mansion. She believed the diamonds had never been entrusted to her for comfort alone. They had been protected for generations so they could finally restore what greed had stolen. She invested carefully. Local builders, carpenters, farmers, and craftsmen found steady work rebuilding the estate. Families who had once struggled to survive earned honest livelihoods, helping transform the abandoned property into a place filled with purpose again. Young people returned to the countryside, bringing new energy to land that many believed had been forgotten forever. Part of the restored farmhouse became a historical museum where the journals, maps, and carefully preserved documents told the extraordinary story of courage, sacrifice, and truth. Visitors walked through its quiet halls, learning how one family's determination had protected both justice and an unimaginable treasure through generations of temptation. The underground vault remained sealed from public view, protected by modern security and strict legal safeguards. Its diamonds represented wealth, but its true value rested in the lessons it carried. Standing beneath the old oak tree one peaceful evening, Amelia watched children laughing across the fields and neighbors gathering for the annual harvest festival. She smiled softly. The greatest reward had never been the fortune hidden beneath the farm. It was seeing a place once abandoned by hope become a symbol of honesty, resilience, and new beginnings. For the first time in many generations, the land was no longer guarding a secret. It was creating a future. Autumn arrived quietly, painting the restored farmhouse in shades of gold and amber. What had once been dismissed as a worthless ruin had become a place filled with life. Visitors wandered through the historic estate each day, listening to stories of courage, sacrifice, and the remarkable discovery that had restored justice to countless families. Laughter echoed across the fields where silence had ruled for decades. Before sunrise one peaceful morning, Amelia walked alone toward the old oak tree overlooking the farmhouse. It was the place where her journey had truly begun, where fear had first given way to hope. She rested her hand against the weathered trunk, grateful for everything the land had revealed. As she traced the rough bark, her fingers brushed against something unexpected inside a hollow opening. Curious, she reached inside and carefully pulled out a small engraved metal box coated in dust. Its lock had long since rusted away. Inside rested a single sealed letter. With steady hands, Amelia unfolded the fragile paper and began to read. If these words have reached you, then you have already proven what every guardian before you prayed for. You chose responsibility over riches, truth over comfort, and courage over fear. Never believe the diamonds were our greatest treasure. Wealth can be stolen, hidden, or spent. Character cannot. That is the inheritance we protected above all else. A quiet smile crossed Amelia's face as tears gathered in her eyes. She gently folded the letter and looked across the flourishing fields, realizing that every hardship she had endured had led her to this moment. As the first rays of sunlight illuminated the farmhouse, the view slowly widened across the peaceful estate. Far below the restored buildings, beyond the chamber that had revealed the diamond vault, another narrow stone passage disappeared into complete darkness. Its entrance remained untouched. Its destination remained unknown. Some secrets had finally found their ending. Others were still waiting for the right person to discover them. And somewhere beneath the land that had changed Amelia's life forever, history had not yet finished telling its story.